I picked this image today because these peacock feathers kind of remind me of neurons or nerve cells. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the nervous system, and we're going to be using Stipe Miocic, this guy. He's an MMA fighter. Maybe you don't know him, but it doesn't matter. Just know he's a fighter. And he will be helping us out in understanding everything we need to know. So the nervous system, many people think super complicated, but for what you need to know, it's not that bad, and it's going to make all sense just now. So when people think of the nervous system, they think the brain, and that's partly correct. So let's think about what the brain does. So the brain is pretty smart, right? And what it does is it controls what we feel. So when we get punched, so when this guy gets punched in the face, he's gonna feel it, right? Now what's gonna allow him to feel it? His brain. His brain is gonna create the pain so that he knows to move out of the way or get away from the danger, right? So one thing is for sure, pain. It helps you feel pain. Now, another thing is it helps you do certain things. So it helps you move around, fart, whatever, do anything. It helps you, it is the thing that tells your body what to do, okay? And lastly, it helps you feel certain emotions like anger, happiness, sadness, right? So these are just some of the things our brain can do. Now, the brain is not the only thing our nervous system is made of. Just like our nervous system is made up of a bunch of things, and the brain is one of them, okay? Because remember, we have many other systems like the heart, like the cardiovascular system, that's your heart and your blood vessels. We have the digestive system, immune system. So nervous system is just another system, okay? And the brain is a part of it, but it's not all of it, okay? Now, just like the heart or the cardiovascular system is made up of heart cells, right? The nervous system is made up of neurons, right? That's why I picked this image, because they kind of look like this. So neurons, right? So another name for neuron could be nerve cell or nerve fiber. These are all synonyms. So when you hear these three names, don't think it's a different thing. They all mean the exact same thing. But for some reason, scientists just decided to name them three things. Okay, all synonyms. Now, what did I mean by the nervous system is not only the brain? I thought it was only the brain, right? Why, what else? So let me show you. So we're going to be using a real life situation to explain the nervous system, but we're going to get to it just now. Before that, I want to explain what I mean by the brain is not the only thing that the nervous system is made of. So here we have two models, okay? The one model shows the brain and the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. And the other model shows a bunch of branches coming from the spinal cord. The spinal cord is not here, but these branches are coming from the spinal cord, okay? So, all of this is your entire nervous system, okay? All of these things. So, clearly not just your brain, your spinal cord and these branches coming from your spinal cord is part of your nervous system. So, they give a name to these separate things. So this one right here, including your brain and your spinal cord, is called the central nervous system, CNS, central nervous system, because it is the thing most centered to your body. So it's your brain and your spinal cord. These other ones are branching off, going to your extremities, going to where they need to go. So they call that one the PNS, peripheral. Peripheral means not like basically the opposite of central. It's far away. So peripheral nervous system. Now, what is the relationship between these two? So both the CNS plus the PNS make up your entire nervous system, okay? Now, the CNS is considered like the big boss, okay? It is the one that decides what happens and what happens, like it's the one that decides everything, basically. So let me clear this up. The PNS is like the worker for the big boss. So for example, your PNS will take signals from the periphery and bring them to your central nervous system. Your central nervous system will make decisions and decide what happens next, and then tell these peripheral nervous system to do those things, to make the things happen. So these work for the big boss. The big boss makes all the decisions, and the PNS makes sure that those things come to life, okay? Now, there are some important neurons we need to know. So remember I said neurons make up the nervous system. Now there are different types of neurons that do different things. So the ones you need to know is this. We've got motor neurons. So motor neurons, a motor is something that makes something happen, right? If you have a motor in a car, that allows the car to move, right? So a motor neuron is kind of like the same thing in a human. It allows us to move. So a motor neuron will send a signal from our spinal cord to our muscles to allow them to move, okay? So it's going from the central nervous system to the periphery, okay? Allowing us to move. So a motor neuron is part of the peripheral nervous system. It'll be one of these little fibers, okay? Now, on the opposite side, the opposite of motor is sensory. So we have these other neurons that can help us sense things like pain, temperature, um, whether something is hard or soft. Okay, so these neurons will come from our skin or any other place and go to the central nervous system to help us, to help transmit the information to our brain so we can be aware of what we're feeling. So sensory neurons help us feel things, so going from the periphery to the central nervous system, whereas the motor neuron goes from the spinal cord to our muscles to help things move. So these two are part of the peripheral nervous system, okay? Now, part of the central nervous system, we have something called relay neurons, okay? They're in the spinal cord and going to our brain. These kind of serve as an intermediate neuron in between our motor neurons and the brain, or our sensory neurons and the brain. So you'll see what I mean. So for example, let's say our sensory neurons receive a signal. Someone touched your elbow. It will send that signal to our spinal cord. Now here in the spinal cord, another neuron will take that signal and take it to our brain. This neuron is called a relay neuron. At the same time, a signal that, say your brain has an idea and it wants to move now your elbow, it will send that signal down the spinal cord by the same neuron, a relay neuron. Now the relay neuron will then come to a specific area in the spinal cord and then transfer that signal to a motor neuron, which will then travel down and tell your muscles to move your arm so that your elbow can move. Okay? So these are the three important neurons you need to know. Relay neurons, motor neurons, sensory neurons, that's it. And I'm going to use this real life example and everything will make a lot of sense. So if you're not sure yet, just stay tuned. So just to label this, spinal cord, just in case you don't know. And by the way, yeah, so when I'm making this, so the spinal cord, this line represents neurons, okay? Because the whole nervous system is made up of neurons. Your brain is made up of trillions of neurons. These are neurons, okay? I just didn't put neurons there because it would take a lot of work. Plus, it would look worse. So just to make it look good. Okay. Now let's go to this real life scenario. Say we have Stipe Miocic, right? He's walking down the street and he's not looking behind him. Someone comes and whacks him right on the shoulder, okay? Real hard. Now what's gonna happen? Without our nervous system, if he didn't have a nervous system, he wouldn't be able to feel that. And he would just keep walking, okay? Now, so our nervous system plays a very important role, both the peripheral and the central nervous system. So what do you think is going to sense that pain? And what do you think is going to transfer it to his brain so he can comprehend the pain? Something called sensory neurons, right? So we're talking now about a peripheral nervous system. So let's pretend this is a sensory neuron, okay? It's going to be at his arm where he was punched. So say he was punched right here. This sensory neuron will take that signal, okay, and transfer it to the center of his body in the spinal cord. Okay, so this is the sensory neuron. And now it will transmit that signal to something called a relay neuron. Okay, this relay neuron, which is in the central nervous system because it's in the spinal cord, will take that signal and transfer it to his brain. And once it reaches his brain, there are other neurons there that can help you process that information and make you understand that you've been hit and you should now be fearful and be ready and vigilant, okay? So the relay neuron just transfers information from the peripheral nervous system to your brain, okay? So you can understand what's happening. Now your brain will make some decisions and be like, okay, I've been punched. I need to be afraid now and get ready to fight. So now it will send a signal down by the relay neuron, but instead of sending it to the sensory neuron, it will send it to something called the motor neuron. Okay, it can send it to many motor neurons. So say his brain decided that he's going to now run away. Now it's going to send a signal to his leg. But since this is an MMA fighter, he's not going to run away. So your brain might instead decide to send a signal to his arm, okay? So that he can now use that arm and whack the crap out of this guy, okay? So do you see the picture? You need to know the relationship between these three neurons. The sensory neuron senses the information, sends it to your central nervous system, where it's transferred to a relay neuron, which will send it to your brain, and your brain will make decisions and send it back by this relay neuron, which will then transfer it to a motor neuron to make a movement, okay? So all three of these are super important. And now he can basically beat this guy's ass, okay? Now, I'm gonna have one more example, just in case that wasn't clear enough. Here we have Bruce Lee, okay? Here's a little quote by Bruce Lee, okay? Be like water, my friend. Now, let's say Bruce Lee was training, okay, and he was above a kettle, and the kettle was boiling, and so steam came, and the steam touched his skin, and he's now burnt real bad. What's gonna happen? So if he's burnt real bad, what do we suspect? So the steam touches his skin. Now my challenge for you is, put these where you think they belong on this diagram. So let me do it. So steam touches the skin. Peripheral nerves will now send the signal to his spinal cord. So the peripheral nerves, these sensory neurons, right? So this one will belong here, will send a signal to his spinal cord. His spinal cord will then transfer it to his brain, okay? And his brain will make a decision and send it back down the spinal cord. So those are relay neurons. Now finally, the spinal cord will then send a signal to a motor neuron to allow him to move his arm, okay? So this was just another way of showing the same thing, okay? So I hope this makes sense so far. Now the last thing we gotta do is explaining the structure of this ultimate neuron. So we've been mentioning this neuron. We've been using it now. But what's the structure, okay? What's important about it that we need to know? So a neuron, so here I have it. Maybe you can already label some stuff. So go ahead and try and label some stuff. But I'll get into it now. So here we have a neuron, a cell body, okay? So this whole thing is a cell body, okay? This specific part in the center is called a nucleus. Just like all other cells, there's nucleus. This is where your proteins are gonna be made, where your DNA is, and all that sort of stuff. Now, you need to know another part. So this little spikes, all these little spikes, what are they? These are called dendrites. So dendrites is the places where the signal is picked up. So let's go back to this image. So you can see here, these little dendrites. They are the things that are going to sense the pain, or sense temperature, or sense touch. Okay, so that's what dendrites do. They sense they take the signal. They are the receptor of whatever is happening. Okay, so they will take that signal. Okay, and then that signal will be transferred down here through this little pipe called an axon, okay? So the pipe thing, the whole pipe thing is called an axon. Now, in order to be able to send this signal as fast as possible, we need these little cells called Schwann cells, okay? Schwann cells. And you can think of it like a swan is normally white, okay? A swan. Now, in reality, these are white, okay? This image shows that it's yellow, but they're actually white, okay? Schwann cells make something called myelin sheath. So this little thing here. Myelin sheath is very useful in speeding up the transmission. So when this dendrite picks up a signal and it transfers it here, these little myelin sheaths can speed up the process. So it can be like, doof, doof, doof. They can speed it up, make the signal send really fast. Because without these, they will travel way more slowly. Okay, so that's the purpose of the Schwann cell. Then we have these little spaces in between the Schwann cells called the nodes of Ranvier, okay? This is pretty much just a place in between these cells, and this is where the signal jumps to. So for example, if we get the signal here, the Schwann cell speeds up the signal to jump, 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 okay? So that's all you need to know. The node of Ranvier is in between these cells. You don't need to know any more details about that. And then finally, we have this. This is the end of the neuron, called the nerve terminal branches, okay? So After the signal is picked up by the dendrite, transferred down here, all the way down here, all the way down here, it will finally reach the end. And this end will now transfer, this terminal branch will now transfer the signal to the next neuron. So what I mean is, remember, we had the sensory neuron, it picked up the signal, it transferred it down here to the terminal branches, and now it will transfer that signal to the relay neuron. Okay? So basically the terminal branches is important to transfer the signal to the next neuron. Okay. In the next videos, we're going to be talking about exactly how it picks up the signal and what mechanism allows it to send it down this neuron, okay? And then in the video after that, we'll talk about how the signal is sent from this terminal branch to the next neuron's dendrite, okay? Because it kind of looks like this. Let me show you. Neurons are arranged like this. So we have the head, the cell body, and then it connects to the next neuron cell body. So the terminal branch will send a signal to the next neuron's dendrite, and it will travel down to the terminal. The terminal will transfer the signal to the next neuron's dendrites. Okay, so that's how it works. Sometimes in your body, neurons can be a meter long. So sometimes an entire neuron can go from here to your finger. But sometimes, for example, in your spinal cord, the neurons may not be that long, and so they need to be connected like this so that the signal can be sent all the way, okay? So that's it that we need to know about this basic introduction of the nervous system.